Yet again, a really warm welcome to everybody. For those of you who don't know, my name is Janine Kirby, and I'm the chairperson of EMISA. And as a doctor and a homeopath myself, I'm really interested in this topic. And really a big warm welcome and a thank you to Trish, Didi, and Ivo, who have agreed to present this learning forum to us. Trish is an old friend of EMISA and of our community. She's done many things for us, and we sort of regard her as one of our own, even though she lives so far away. So a very warm welcome to you, Trish. She comes with immense experience and a very warm and wise presence. So thank you, Trish. And she'll be joined by Didi, who is one of the directors of EMISA and a life coach, and Ivo, who is a physiotherapist and also spends much of his time in the space working with people with cancer. So thank you to all of you, and over to you, Didi.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Janine, for the warm welcome. It is quite a delight to be sharing tonight with all of you, friends, teachers, colleagues, on a topic that is so important and touches all of us in one way or the other. And to be able to do this in a space with Trish Bartley, who I consider a mentor, a teacher, and a dear friend, and with Ivo, who was my co-partner in the 2-year training when we trained a couple of years ago, and we've also become very close friends. So having a conversation with the two of them on the work that they're doing and on what touches all of us, even though directly or indirectly, if we're not working with it, and a very important discussion on meeting the difficulty with mindfulness and cancer. And yeah, so just a very well welcome. And we wanting to bring this with warmth, with kindness, with openness, and just to explore it for ourselves, those who are health professionals and those who are affected directly or indirectly. Just by beginning to say, in the realm of mindfulness and cancer, navigating difficulties is not just an inevitable, but an opportunity for profound growth. As John Kabat-Zinn says, beautifully articulate, says, it's about embracing the present moment with an open heart and a non-judgmental mind. Even amidst life's most challenging experiences, when facing the formidable adversary of cancer, mindfulness becomes not just a practice, but a lifeline, a way to cultivate resilience, acceptance, and peace amidst the storm. So let's embark on this journey by asking Trish to just open us up with just sharing what mindfulness and cancer mean.
Thank you, Didi. That's really lovely. I've got a request, and it may be a little bit unpopular, so forgive me. You can put it down to, you know, my white Englishness. But I would so love to see your faces and to be able to connect with you on the screen. So if it's possible to turn on your camera, it doesn't matter if you're wearing your jammies, if you're not in your fashionable best, but it would be so nice just to see you. Oh, thank you. It just makes all the difference in the world, to be honest. Otherwise, we're talking to names and it's just not the same, is it? It's just, even though you've got some lovely pictures up there. So I guess maybe the first place, Didi, to start, I don't know, shall I start with how MBCT for Cancer got going? Would that be do you think that would be a good place to start?
That's an excellent start. Thank you.
Okay, so I was ever so lucky. I was involved with mindfulness just around the time that the original MBCT, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, was being published. So the three psychologists who I think some of you may know, I think you'd know Mark Williams. He's worked with you particularly. But Mark Williams, John Teasdale, and Zindel Siegel, who comes from Canada, the three of them had been doing this major work with people with recurrent depression. And they produced and they wrote up and they published MBCT, which in fact in those days it wasn't MBCT for anything, it was just MBCT. That was the original MBCT. And Mark, I think, had the vision, had the foresight that actually, because the research was so extraordinarily powerful and successful, he realized that it was going to be really quite a big deal in the mental health world. And so he got together a group of us. I mean, we were a really motley crowd. I was one of the more mottled, I think, than some of the others. But there was some sort of bona fide psychologists and people like that who kind of knew each other. They had been involved in the trials. And then there were some extra bods like me who'd been using mindfulness and meditation in their work. But this was kind of early days before even teachers were beginning to be trained in Britain, in Great Britain. So so we went along to this retreat and things started. And at the time, I had no hair, so I was actually in the middle of treatment for cancer, for breast cancer. And I remember talking to Mark at the end of the retreat, which was amazing. It was tough, but it was amazing. On this very remote island off the edge of Wales. And I remember talking to him and saying, well, I'd love to be involved in this, but I don't know what I could do, And I remember him, I noticed him looking at my bald head. This was sort of about 25 years ago. And seeing, thinking, oh, okay, cancer. Yeah, of course. So, well, I suppose I could teach people with cancer. And he then opened doors for me. And then later on, John Teasdale, he supervised me to actually develop, to kind of adapt MBCT that they'd been working on into MBCT for cancer. And I worked with John Teasdale for 10 years on a very regular basis, sending videos. We ran some workshops to look at weeks 5 and 6 because they didn't kind of move across all that well from what they'd been doing. And then it moved on from there. And then from there, we started, I continued to work 3 times a year in the actual hospital, actually with patients in the hospital where I'd been treated. And then we started training teachers. And that was I think we started training teachers back in 2011, something like that. And the handbook was published that I wrote, MBCT for Cancer. That came out in 2012 with a lot of help from a lot of people. So that was kind of the beginnings, Didi. I mean, that was kind of how MBCT for Cancer kind of came about. Does that? I hope that makes some sense.
Yes, Trish, wow, lovely. Beautiful to hear the background of the story and how you now formulated it into this handbook. Mindfulness, a kindly approach of being with cancer. What was your experience as you wrote the book? And I think what I understand, the book was formulated from you actually teaching others and teaching this course. And what were your findings in dealing with those who were dealing with cancer?
Yeah. There were 2 books, or there are 2 books actually. The 2012 was the Teacher's Handbook. That's the kind of curriculum program that sort of really sets out the week by week, 8-week course. The one that you've just mentioned that's got a blue cover with some daisies on it, Mindfulness, a kindly approach to being with cancer. That's a little bit more informal. It's still based on MBCT for cancer, but it's more informal in that it tells a lot more stories. It's very much dedicated, I guess, for people with cancer themselves to work through it in their own way, at their own time. It doesn't need 8 weeks. It might need 2 years. It might need, I don't know, it might need, it's up to them as to how they take it through. So I guess there are 4 things about MBCT for cancer that certainly when it first came out, really were kind of a bit different from what was around at that time. Now, as I pull them out, I think that many of you who know other curricula, we need to say, don't we, Many of you who know other curriculum will say, well, that's not very different to what we do. But in 2012, it was a bit different. And things have now moved on in a lovely way that I think it's incredible, really, all the different programs that are now available for different specialist populations. But the four things that I think were probably a little bit different that we looked at was we had a big focus on group. Now that won't surprise any of you because I was in South Africa just last March, just over a year ago. Is that possible? Feels like a couple of months or a couple of years. But I was teaching some of you here on this call. I was teaching some of you around groups and teaching mindfulness-based groups, and it was really special. And I wish we could do it again really soon, but it's a big ask, isn't it? So group has always been of interest to me, and so it was inevitable that in adapting a program, group came into it. But it's very significant that people, and I think Ivo and those of you who've worked with people with cancer, you'll know this, that actually the group is very important, you know, connecting with other people who are in similar situations, hearing their stories, you know, sharing your own story. It's incredibly important. It's important for all sorts of situations, but it's very important with group. So group comes into the curriculum in a big way. The other thing that may be a bit surprising is the body comes in big way. Now, again, you know, of course, because mindfulness-based programs all have a big emphasis on the body. Of course they do. But you wouldn't expect that maybe with people with cancer because the body has let them down in some ways and has let us down. I mean, it's as I mentioned, I've had cancer myself. I've had it twice actually. So it's interesting that we would focus so much on the body, but actually the body's hugely important. And that's a very big priority really for the whole program. Then the third area was brief practices. And that's something that's really grown and grown. And I think in a way is still quite unique amongst the 8-week programs. And I think it's quite interesting why that's the case. And I think people with cancer, you know, they don't want to, or they don't have the opportunity to go and dig out a CD or get their phone out and listen to a recording. They might do if they're in bed or if they're at home, or you know, if they're kind of more static. But if they're perhaps improving a little bit and they're in the supermarket, or they're sitting in their kids, you know, having a meeting with a teacher, or anything, any kind of informal everyday occurrence, they need something in their back pocket. They need something that's really accessible here and now, that's really very, very brief, very, very significant. And I know that EMISA is including brief practices in your new iteration of your training, which I'm so pleased about, because I think they're hugely important. Doesn't mean the core practices aren't important, because they are. But the brief practices in some ways are much more accessible, and they can be used every day, just a little moment. And perhaps we could guide some, Didi, at some point in this call. That would be good. And then the last one is kindness. Now, again, you know, everybody knows kindness. You know, everybody knows that kindness comes into mindfulness-based programs. And it's, you know, it's really important that it does, and that's much more brought out now. But in 2012, interestingly, the original foundational attitudes that John Kabat-Zinn brought out, he kind of forgot about kindness. Of course he didn't, because kindness is embodied and embedded in the whole of MBSR in a huge way. And it's now been added into those foundational qualities. But in the original days, kindness wasn't there. So kindness is much more front of mind now, sort of friendliness, a friendly approach to things. And I think that's important. So we've got brief practices, the body, the group, and kindness as the four kind of salient iterations that have really been drawn out of MBCT for cancer. Yeah.
And Trish, would you kindly give us a taste of those brief practices that we can
It's
do as a
funny.
group at this moment.
Yes, it's funny you should say that, Didi. Yes.
Yeah.
Goodness, that's a surprise. So, yes, let's do that. And I notice that some of you are already beginning to move your bodies. So, how about you don't even move? How about you just do this practice however you're sitting? Just exactly as you are, hands as you are, legs as you are, the body just as it is. And with your eyes open, and that's a little bit different as well. But if you choose to, and if it's okay, with your eyes open, perhaps just letting your eyes gaze, perhaps gently beneath the screen. That's where I tend to go to. But you go wherever you like, maybe away from the screen, and just let your eyes rest somewhere. And then when you're ready, simply coming to your feet on the floor. And just seeing if you can feel the soles of your feet and the points of contact between your feet and the floor, or your feet and your shoes, perhaps. And this is very simple. You're just feeling points of contact. You're feeling the weight of the body moving down. And you're feeling the solid of the floor beneath you. Feet on the floor. Okay.
Thank you. With that, I want us to almost segue to the importance of taking care of ourselves as practitioners, those who are in the health professionals. And I want to almost start off with reading from page 26 in A Kindly Approach to Being with Cancer. And this is an extract from Dr. Atul Gawande. And he says, we've been wrong about what our job is in medicine. We think our job is to ensure health and survival, but really it is larger than that. It is to enable well-being, and a well-being is about the reasons one wishes to be alive. That's what really matters. And I think that's so important as those who are health professionals giving and offering this work and wanting to bring Ivo's work with his experience with working with people who are at the end of life. As a professional and personally, what has your experience been?
Thanks, Didi, and hello, everyone. Yeah, so I just sort of think to what started me sort of getting into this work and getting into hospice work and cancer work and also HIV/AIDS and recently COVID. And I just sort of, as Trish was talking, I was thinking about how we all touched by cancer at some point in our life, a lot of us. And for me, it was when I was 5 years old and there was a lady next door who became like a second mom to me. And then at the age of 13, she got cancer and, 2 or 3 long years of battling it, she died. And I remember that was very formative for me. And as I started caring for patients with cancer and sort of going like what Elizabeth Kubler-Ross was like one of my seminal books when I was like 24 years ago, and sort of started me on this thing of like, okay, what is it to care for people who are going through these things? And obviously, in the beginning, I think a lot of us healthcare professionals come from this in the beginning, is just giving out all the time, just constantly giving out and thinking that will be enough. And then starting to realize, actually, I also have to be present with myself while I'm giving out in that way. And I think mindfulness is obviously a key practice here, is just to be present to what is going on with us. And Didi, you were talking about the self-care aspect. And I think that's primary when you're a healthcare professional working in these fields, is really, I remember Caroline May is saying once in one of her talks that the world is not given more by being up a patient and down a healer. So to come from this full place of presence and to really be with that person you're working with is a form of self-care, because we are then able to hold and witness ourselves and the other person. And I think that's quite a journey, and I think that's a constant process as you meet new people and as you're going through this work. And I think cancer maybe presents a very specific, there's so many social things around cancer and ways we think about it. And we told about carcinogens in our food. We told about all these different narratives, and to sort of be aware of all of that and then just be present to this person and their needs and your needs at the same time. So in terms of self-care, I think it's very important to also look at your own attitudes and your own kindness towards yourself around cancer, fear of dying, fear of treatment, fear of your hair falling out. All these things are coming at you. And I think you as a practitioner need to have dealt with your own fears and your own sort of narratives around that in order to be fully present for people who are dealing with this. So I think that's the first place to start. And that's quite a lot of work, because it's a lot of real primal things that we are dealing with when we are working with people with cancer, and a lot of triggering things. And even now, after 20 years of working with cancer patients, you know, I've got now one patient who I'm actually now really starting to like. And it's been a year and a half of treating her, and she's been in and out of hospice care. And to actually go like, oh, and like sit kindly with myself. And I love Trish bringing in that kindness, because I think it's such the primary field you've got to be in with yourself and the other person, is going like, oh, she might die soon. And I've sort of now got to know her. How am I with this? How am I relating to this? And I think just that has to be in the way you're dealing with people on a one-to-one basis, and realizing it's going to trigger things in you and be able to be with that. And that self-care is very important, so that we don't get into burnout and caregiver fatigue and all of those things. So I think it's to meet each person who's going through their so I'm more one-on-one than doing group work. So it's interesting that you sort of have to be right in the moment and being very sensitive to what is happening in the moment with each person, and really witnessing their story and their journey. So really listening to what they're asking for in terms of need, and also really being honest with yourself about what you can give and what you can hold in that moment. So I think that's where self-care becomes really important, to just always be monitoring your inner world as well as the other person's world, so that you're not just giving out, that you're including yourself in that circle, in that compassion as well.
Thank you, Ivor. I think you've touched on so much and such richness that of your sharing there, and wanting Trish to just step in from her point of view.
Yes, I love what you say, Ivor. I think it's really beautiful, and I think it's quite interesting, because we tend to kind of differentiate between self and other, and of course we do. Of course we do. How can we not? But actually, if we're present in this moment, whether we're present with an individual or present with a group, it's really an incredible gift. As you've been saying, it's an incredible gift both to the people that you're working with, but also to the one that you're sitting beside. I think it's incredible. A colleague and I are beginning to do some work around mindfulness informed cancer care, which is actually, we've offered it a couple of times, and it's actually tremendously popular. You know, it's just, as a training, it's quite brief, and it's just lovely looking at the difference between mindfulness based, which is a curriculum that's probably 8 weeks, but not necessarily. Mindfulness informed, which is where exactly what you've been describing, Ivor, where the practitioner is really being informed by mindfulness and working with the other, with the client or the patient in that way. And mindfulness may not even be mentioned, but mindfulness is informing the relationship. And then mindfulness shared, which might be just a little step in between the two, where maybe feet on the floor could be just shared in a very brief way. Yeah, so I think that's lovely. I mean, I think, Didi, I don't know if this is the right moment, but my sense is that, and I don't know how all of you on this call feel, but I imagine that many of you have either had a personal experience of cancer, or you work in that field, or you have worked in that field. And my perspective is I haven't worked abroad a huge amount, but quite a bit. And my perspective is that the psychological support for people with cancer, whether they're in treatment, whether they're with advanced disease, whether they're coming towards the end of their lives, is very, very patchy. In some places, it's fantastic. I'd like to be in the hospice when I'm dying that Ivor is at. That sounds great to me. So I think there are some places where good practice is phenomenal. But many places, I say even, as you probably know, our NHS, our health service is in a terrible way, which is tragic, actually. It used to be the pride of the UK, but it's now very much not. But, even in somewhere like the UK, support for people with cancer is very, very patchy. Some places it's good, some places it's non-existent. But if we go into the middle of Africa or the middle of India, India apparently has almost no palliative care. Right? Can you imagine all those people? There's apparently almost no palliative care. Even somewhere like China, or I've worked in Hong Kong, plenty of places where, in fact, psychological support or mindfulness support is dependent. Well, psychological support is dependent on opportunity. And if we look around this Zoom call, okay, it's a huge generalization, but my guess is that most of us are middle class. Most of us have some sort of reasonable income. Is that wrong of me to assume that? Maybe I'm quite wrong in that, but I suspect that most people teaching mindfulness have got another income that's enabled them to train. I know that Simon and Barbara and Linda and others, the board in general, are working very, very hard to find ways of offering training that doesn't cost yards and yards of money. But it's tough. It's very tricky. There are mindfulness training organizations in Europe that have now gone bust. Can you imagine? It's not that surprising. So one of the things that Didi and I are involved with, and we'd love to get Ivor on board as well, please, is this project that we've developed, this International Mindfulness and Cancer Project, which at some point, Didi, I'd love to share a little bit more about, but probably now is not the moment. But it's based on the need for these brief practices and some of these approaches to really be disseminated out, because 8-week courses are taking too long. And maybe we need to be more accessible and more immediate and a lot cheaper, a lot less money involved. Yeah.
Trish, just
Yeah.
talking from that is just, there's a big, as you said, there's a very big need for mindfulness and smaller practices because it is not accessible. And I found that a lot with my patients, like as a physio, I can come in as the physio and have that whole support of medical aids and they pay for it and all of that comes in. But I can also offer this, as you said, mindfulnessly informed physiotherapy and come in and go, okay, I might come in and do exercises, but actually sometimes it's actually just about, she's having a bad day today. I'm just going to hold her hand and we're just going to sit quietly for a bit and do a little practice that she doesn't even know is a practice and just go, we're just going to sit here and breathe with, me just witnessing you going through a tough patch now. And it seems like such a small thing, but if let's say all physios were given that little bit of training to be able to do that, I think it would be fundamentally, a different world in terms of palliative care. And I've just been in contact with a hospice that's opening up here in Joburg, or they've just opened up. But they're really looking at integrating all of this, the care of palliative, but also bringing in mindfulness. And they were talking about but we're not interested in just mindfulness for the patient. We're interested in mindfulness for the patient, the caregivers, the family, the whole, and our team who's also there. So for them, the mindfulness must be this ground from which everything just happens. And then it's the space happens automatically because everyone's mindfully informed the space.
I think that sounds really beautiful, Ivor. I think one of the things I feel quite passionate about, actually, and I don't know how some of you will feel about this, but I feel that there are plenty of practitioners who are actually quite naturally very mindful. They may not necessarily use that word, but I don't want us to colonize that word. You know, mindfulness is about awareness. It's about heart. And actually, those, you know, those, I mean, those of us who've been ill know the practitioners and the medics and the, you know, the people who've treated us. I mean, for me, one of the most mindful people who looked after me the first time I had cancer was the porter. And this may sound mad, and he was wheeling me down for surgery, and I was completely terrified, as you can imagine. And he had this big belly, and my feet. I don't think I've ever told this story before. It's a bit weird, but my feet were up against his belly because the bed wasn't, you know, wasn't quite long enough. And he was just very, very kind. You know, and as he kind of turned the bed around, you know, we had some contact there, and he just had this very kind smile and very kind manner. It was hugely helpful. Now, he would never have heard of the word mindfulness, but actually, in his own way, that's exactly what he was offering in his role, and it was really valuable. It's really, really helpful. So I think, you know, I think in some ways we don't want to be. We want mindfulness to spread, and we want to share it, and we want people to really understand what they're already doing very often and what they can do more of. Don't know if others of you agree with that or not.
Trish,
I really love that. I really love that, Trish. It sounds like the beautiful phrase that we use as South Africans and Africans of Ubuntu, that most of the caregivers within our hospitals have that ingrained within them. And what more if they were given the chance to be given the tools, the techniques, as to emphasize that within themselves as they're dealing with patients, with those who've come in, or even their family members. So I think it's so important that we just keep that in mind, in that, you know, the work that we're doing as MISA is to touch many lives, and to actually now offer our new offering is also based on bringing in NGOs, those who are on the ground. How can we be able to take mindfulness to those people who may not have had the opportunity of hearing what mindfulness is? And actually, as you said, mindfulness is who they are, or maybe bringing out what's already within them and only refining the tools and techniques and the teachings within them. So sorry, Ivo, you were coming in there. I just wanted to mention that.
I just sort of think of working with caregivers and family, and how it's actually the really simplest things that are the most impactful. Just like Trish saying, it was just that simple, you know, touching him on the belly and him being present and kind. And to really translate that for people, like not getting hooked on the mindfulness word, but on maybe the being word of just like what is already present within a lot of people who are caring for people. So I do find, like, you know, a lot of caregivers, especially in South Africa, are usually Christian, and just finding like, okay, well, you know, me explaining mindfulness and going through this whole narrative is not gonna, I don't need to teach a whole other thing. I can just talk about, like, Trisha, sorry, Didi was saying Ubuntu, and let's just slow down, and let's, you know, really come from our hearts. And then immediately people get it. They don't really need much training to get it, because they're already halfway there. Sometimes it's just a matter of slowing down, bringing them into the circle with you and the patient and the family, and going, let's just do something small together. And this is what you can do with the person when they are struggling. And I find it's really the simpler practices that have the most benefit, especially with cancer patients who are often very tired, on different drugs, on morphine. The caregivers are exhausted. So to make them do a 15-minute breathing practice is really actually not quite kind. It's actually not the kindest thing to do. To just give them something that's a bit smaller and bring them all in, and then reframe it in a different language. It doesn't have to be in the language of mindfulness.
Would you be happy to just give us a touch point and a practical experience as to how you deal with that?
Sure. So this was maybe a month or two ago, and my patient was just going through, like, she was just she was feeling like she's a burden. Everyone, you know, everyone's doing all this stuff for her. She's just sitting there. She can't help. So her daughter's very open. So her daughter's also knows some mindfulness people. So it was a bit easier there. But bringing even the caregiver in, and we just sat around and we just sort of said, I said, can we just feel into how hard this is? And if we could just feel, and I got them all just to touch their hearts, and I brought in the patient was there as well, and just say, just can we all just feel how hard this is? Like, you want to care for your mom. Your mom doesn't want to be a burden. You want to care, the caregiver, you want to help her and help her to the loo, and you're doing all your work. And can we just sit with how wonderful that is, that you're all there for each other, even though you're aching in your hearts? And we all just sat there just for, it was just literally 20 or 30 seconds. And I said, we could just breathe, and we're just all here together. Could we just appreciate all of us being here together? And it's okay that you feel like a burden, and it's okay that you want to give and help your mom. It's all okay. It's all part of what's happening. And let's just see each other. And that was it. And I said, and anytime you feel like you're a burden, maybe just hold your heart. So I gave her a sort of practice of holding her heart and going, just feel into that and feel into what your daughter has just been with you here, saying she enjoys taking care of you. She wants to do it. And then just see all these people around you when you feel like a burden. And it was such a simple practice. And the week later, she was like, you know, Eva, it was just, it didn't help. She was like, it didn't help me get any less crazy, is what she said to me. But she says, whenever I was getting crazy, I just went, okay, I'm going to come back to that, just this feeling, and going, it's okay to feel that feeling. And I think that's also a thing, just to say, it's okay to feel what you're feeling.
Mm.
And I think as a practitioner, also not wanting to fix it is a big thing.
Mm. Wow. Beautiful. Acceptance of what is, with kindness, with courage, however difficult it may be, and just sitting with that difficulty. And I mean, this is the topic of today, just sitting, dealing with the difficulty, knowing that it will be difficult. As John Kabat-Zinn says, the full catastrophe of life, we're not given the reassurance that everything will be okay, but there will be ups and downs. But it's how we ride the waves of it all. Yeah.
Mm. Mm.
And sometimes a few swear words don't go amiss. You know, that's also mindfulness practices. Sometimes sometimes it's just like, I got my cancer patient to just swear, get angry, be like, tell God to F off if that's how you're feeling. She was like, can I do that? I'm like, yes, you can do that. And if I was being a very mindful practitioner, I might have not felt into that. If I was just, trying to portray mindfulness.
I think, Ivo, your story is very touching, and it makes me think a lot of times when we've been struggling, perhaps, and I'm sure we've all experienced this, whether it's with family members or neighbors, or might be in the context of cancer, it might be something else. But I have a little story where I remember very well early days of my teaching, very, very early days, and there was a woman in the group who had a head and neck cancer, and so she was going for radiotherapy, and I don't know if many of you know, but in fact, she was very, very scared. And it's still the case that there's a mask that goes over the face, and then it's almost like screwed down onto the board that the patient is lying on. So it's pretty tough, and I hope that none of you have experienced that, because I think it's pretty claustrophobic and unpleasant. But it's necessary. So she was anticipating this treatment. And she had been on an 8-week course with me, and she was just coming to the end. And we had this conversation right at the end of this last session. She was saying she had this radiotherapy coming up, and I was thinking, my God, I don't know how I could cope with that. I mean, internally, I was thinking, she was saying, have you got any ideas? And I was thinking, oh my God, what on earth can I say here? Because I haven't a clue. And popped into my head, I I said, well, I suppose you could sort of pretend it's a mask and you're going to a ball. She said, oh, that's a good idea. I could sort of paint it, couldn't I? Sort of in my mind, I could sort of put some colours on it and sort of, because as you probably know, radiotherapy happens every day, often over 3 weeks, perhaps less, it depends. And she said I could sort of build this up. And we kind of spoke, I should think we spoke for, I don't know, 3 minutes. And we both kind of got quite excited by this idea of, a masked ball. But actually in the back of my mind and in my heart, I was thinking, you poor love, this is going to be really quite tough. Now, I never knew what happened. So I had no contact with her after that conversation, until about 5 years later. When a master's student at the university had been doing some research on that particular group, and I'd completely forgotten. And she was giving a sort of presentation of the results of her research, and I was sitting in the room, and I kind of thought, oh, I think I know this woman, but I'd completely forgotten that the research was in connection with the class that I'd been teaching. And she told this, she mentioned in this research that one of the participants who she'd spoken to, it was a qualitative research, had mentioned how incredibly helpful it was to have this conversation about a masked ball and how she took that into her radiotherapy, and it completely changed her experience. Now, this was from somebody who is complete rookie. I mean, it just was an idea. But I would suggest that actually what was as important was that the two of us kind of constructed it together. I was present there with her, and I wasn't sort of saying, oh, I'm sure you'll be fine, which is very tempting. Oh, I'm sure you'll be fine. I was actually saying, oh, it's actually quite tough, isn't it? It's going to be quite tough to manage that. What can we think of? Which wasn't particularly skillful on my part. It was just there was a problem. What were we going to come up with? And I think what it taught me hugely is that we don't necessarily need to have all the kind of tools of the trade. We don't necessarily. John Teasdale used to say to me how extraordinary it was that so many brand new teachers got such good results. He was always very skeptical. How come people who are just starting out as mindfulness teachers were getting these incredibly good research results, which always used to make me laugh because it just was very John. But I think that our intention as teachers, our intention as professionals, if that's the right word, as health professionals, as people working with other people, our intention is incredibly important. And sometimes that's much more pure. Is that a word? I don't know if that's quite right, but it's much more genuine and present and humble. I'm a great one for humility. I really think humility is important. And sometimes when we start out, we have more humility and genuine intention and a wish to do what we can, which sometimes seems very, very small. Yeah.
So me and my partner, Tracy, have been teaching mindful medicine to physios, and we get some other healthcare practitioners in. And a big part of our day is practitioner presence. It's just going just by your very intention of showing up and being heartful and present and mindful and aware is going to change the room, and is going to change the ideas and the things that come through you, because it's a lot more authentic, a lot more pure. And just seeing there's a real thirst for it in the healthcare professional community, and a real intuitive knowing of like, but I know this, or I felt this work through me. But to really have the training around it to go like, but what you're feeling is real, and what you are bringing as presence is a real thing. Because I think medical professionals some of them get very caught on, it needs to be measurable and very objective reality real for it to have effect. And then realizing there's this whole other level of, just by me being there and being mindful of myself, I am affecting the person in the bed across from me. And there's very good research to show that you know, the heart rates start to sync up and the brain waves start to sync up. So it is a very real phenomenon that's happening. And for that light to go on in health professionals' heads, you can see it. It's like, oh, wow, yes, I know I had that effect. But now to actually feel it in real time is, I think, quite mind-blowing for them. Like they go like, oh, okay, actually, this is something I'm doing in the treatment.
Well, thank you, Ivo. I think that's a great point in introducing the program that Trish was referring to earlier, as to how can this be put into a practical program for the health professionals. You're still muted, Trish.
Yeah, no, I lost my mouse. That was why I was still muted. Thanks, Dee Dee. Yes, and thanks, Ivo. It's lovely what you've been talking about. So the project is the brainchild, really, of a colleague of ours in the Netherlands, called Rob Vinken, and he's a real development person. You know, he gets to these ideas and he runs with them. And he's been feeling for a long time, way before the pandemic, that actually 8-week courses in person are really not going to survive. So he's been wanting for a long time to get apps and online programs out there, long before they've become popular or long before the pandemic. So way back, something like 2018, he and I started filming. And we've filmed now up to about 100 brief videos, sort of 3-4 minute long. They're all based on MBCT for cancer. And we've collected them together and put them on a very nice platform called Kajabi, which is a sort of American learning platform. And we've sort of gathered it all together, and Dee Dee has joined us. And this coming Wednesday, we have our second open webinar. But the first one will be available to those on the training program as well. But just to be clear, there are two really aspects of the project, and I'll show you the website in a moment. The first aspect of the project is for people with cancer themselves. So for people with cancer, there are these materials, two collections of materials, excuse me, that are available for them to start with. First one's called the Starter Collection, which is just brief practices, just much like we've been talking about. And then the second one is called the Full Library, which is where people with cancer can go deeper if they want to. And that sort of is the whole intervention, if you like. So it's quite extensive. The other side of the project is for health professionals. For social care professionals, for social workers, doctors, mindfulness teachers, but also people who haven't yet got that involved with mindfulness, but perhaps are very interested in doing so. And this is a full, all the videos, all the different collections of videos, including a teacher's collection and all the webinar collections. They're going to be available as part of we're calling it the facilitator training. And that will include monthly live webinars where we'll have discussions, we'll have practices, we'll have people leading, people guiding each other, we'll have inquiries and so on. And our dream really is that this is going to reach around the globe, not necessarily to thousands and thousands of people, but it will reach people who haven't yet, health professionals who haven't yet come across mindfulness. It will reach, we hope on the cancer side, it will reach people with cancer who've got some internet, they've got a smartphone and they can access it that way, but they haven't otherwise. So there are these two streams. I don't know, Dee Dee, if I've explained it very well. One for people with cancer themselves, and the other stream is the facilitator training program, which is a 12-month program with live webinars and a lot of different materials. We've got lots of other ideas as to how this might develop, but as we're only just getting going, we need to get started first before we branch out and do lots and lots of other planned things. But we're very keen for you to be involved if you'd like to. And the fee structure is extremely pragmatic. So the fee structure is on the basis of what you can afford. So if you can afford the full fee, that's great. You'll be supporting other people to access it. If you can't afford the full fee, we might ask you, well, what can you afford? And you would contribute that. So accessibility is our kind of keyword, really, our watchword. Didi, do you want to come in and clarify?
I think you have you've touched on the important points, but I think where I want to come in is the work of being service and giving this work to others. And that's why I was so attracted to being part of this program, as it's going to be able to touch those who not necessarily would have the opportunity to have this kind of resources by if we are the ones, as you said at the beginning of this, that majority of us in this Zoom room, we are middle class and we are able to afford. And so how can we play our own little part by perhaps, registering and paying the full amount so that another person is blessed in that way. So for me, that really touches my heart with also the work that I do in communities. I offer 8-week courses, and now also to now be able to say this is another avenue of accessing mindfulness, especially to those we know that there is hardly any healthcare systems or they're struggling. Our healthcare systems are really struggling in South Africa. And if we can bring some kind of relief to those in care through mindfulness, it would be, and giving them those tools, it would be really great. And I think if it's okay with you, Trish, to share on the screen, before we open up for some Q&As, to share on the screen the pamphlets and where more information
Sure.
found. And I'm sure Janine will be kind enough to share this also on our website, on the IMISA website, that is. I'm wearing many hats tonight.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thanks, Didi. So this is the flyer that we've produced, which I hope you can all see okay. So there's the three of us at the top. Didi with Pride of Place in the middle. This is our logo, this lighthouse. I like the lighthouse logo very much. And if you see the photograph of the lighthouse, it's not a beautifully painted one. It's slightly scruffy, you know. It's doing a good job, but it's not in pristine condition. But it's protecting those on the sea, which I like very much. So you've got 12-month facilitator training, bringing mindfulness to people with cancer safely. And you've got, in fact, there are going to be 4 collections, because the collection of webinars will build up as we've got our second one coming up. And then we've got the starter collection and the full library for people with cancer. So we've got these 2 streams. And please let people know, because obviously what we need is to kind of get the word out about this. But if this, Janine, if this could be shared, that would be amazing. Or if Lynn can share this, that would be fantastic. And then what else did you want to see as well, Didi? Did you want to see the website? Would that be good?
Yes, just to.
Okay. So I'm getting there. So here's the website. We've been very lucky that somebody called Gary has done this for us. And again, it's got the good old lighthouse. And you'll see that we've got mindfulness for people with cancer. And then we've got the facilitator training program. And if any of you are interested, you just click on those buttons, and they then take you through. If you're interested in knowing more about the project, all you've got to do is just to click on this mailing list button at the top and put your name in and your email. We would love to see you. We would absolutely love to. And initially, you'll be told about the webinar that's coming up this Wednesday. the webinar is going to look at what is it that really matters, which is very much based on Dee Dee's quote from this amazing guy, Atul Gawande. And those of you who are health professionals, I'll just show you his, Ivo, I'm sure, do you know his book? Because if you don't, it's an absolute winner. It's incredibly readable, and it's just a very, very interesting book, which is very much based on Dee Dee's quote. So yeah, so just to recap, it's there for you, the project. Love to have you on board. You won't be taught the full curriculum. You'll be taught a kind of an approach based on brief practices that are very much about being informed, mindfulness informed. And you can go with it as deep and as far as you want to. And it's absolutely based on MBCT for cancer. Yeah. Thanks, Dee Dee.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. I think we've touched on everything. Anything else will be posted on the IMISA website. And we open for any questions that you may have. We'd love to hear your voices, any inputs or anything we hear. Or if Ivo, you have any last comments that you would like to put in, very happy for you to come in there. And I guess oh, here we go. Paul, hi. Oh, lovely to
Hi, Dee Dee.
hello, Paul.
Hello, Ivo, Trish, and everyone. I just want to come back to this mindfulness informed, mindfulness based, and it just excites me. I don't know how new that concept is for everyone. But I'm a coach, and I do life coaching, and one of the clients that I have has had cancer and has been in remission, or however you want to call it, for a number of years. But each time he goes for a scan, there's a high level of anxiety, and I catch myself wanting to sort of say, hey, but come on, look, you've had so many clear scans, it's not going to be so bad. And basically sort of falling into the want to fix it mode. And even suggesting here's a mindfulness practice you can do. And of course, that might be helpful, but actually just needing to be present. And and sometimes he might need to talk, and other times he might not need to. So having to really sense what's helpful for him. Am I just creating more anxiety by, in a coaching session, raising a whole lot of questions? Or am I creating a space where there's kindness and warmth and ability for him to talk if he needs to? So I'm just aware, sometimes I get it right and sometimes I don't. But it's this mindfulness informed that for me as a coach sort of is very helpful.
Shall I come in here, Dee Dee? Yeah. Paul, it's lovely what you're saying. And your insight, I think, into your client, I think is fantastic. Oh, I've lost you because you've taken your hand away. Can you put your hand up again just so I can see where you are? Where have you gone, Paul? There you are, thank you. Because you disappear onto the other screen otherwise. I think what's really helpful, which in a way is what you're talking to, is you're normalizing. So normalizing, and even though you've not experienced it yourself before, you've disappeared again. To actually, yes, there you are. To actually normalize and just say, really can understand, that actually, I mean, I have to tell you that I still go for checkups. I still get anxious. I still ruminate. Oh, well, I've been clear, but actually, who knows? This time it might not be the case. It's like a little hook that's going, look at me, it might be. And actually to normalize and just say, look, it's so understandable. It's so understandable. And maybe every single checkup you'll ever have you'll feel like this. And then there's no fight, there's no pushback. It's like, I'm anxious, I'm uncertain. Of course I am. And how about feet on the floor, just to hold that, you know, as best we can. Yeah. That's probably the best we can do. Yeah.
Thanks, Trish.
Yeah, I would also add to that, it's just witnessing someone's experience is so healing, is so validating. Just that witnessing is sometimes all you need. And I often get that from people going, you're the first person who's just let me be. Let me be anxious and let me be, and not try to go, but look at this way, look at that way. So it is such a valuable skill to just see somebody and let them be.
Thank you Paul for that. Marian, I think you were next.
Hi. Yes, I just want to share a few of my thoughts and experiences. I'm actually a radiation therapist, so when Trish spoke about the lady having her mask, I can definitely relate to that. For me, how I deal with patients is, and I think it probably comes naturally to most of us, but I always think to myself, what happens if that was my mother or my father or a family member of mine? How would I want them to be treated? So I'm always very aware of that. So I speak to the patients and I interact with them in that way. So I'm always mindful of that. And yeah, for me, that's very important. And also, a lot of the times, we spend a lot of time with the patients and they say, how are you? How are you feeling? How was your day? And they would say, oh, no point complaining. And for me, I always say, no, you must complain because this is a safe place. And sometimes complaining makes you feel better. And I realize a lot of them just want to be heard. That's all they want, just to be heard and release whatever they were holding in. That's what I wanted to share.
Yeah, that's beautiful, Marian. Everyone matters. Everyone needs to be acknowledged, and everyone wants to be seen. Yeah, very important. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Hi, and thank you to the three of you for this lovely interactive presentation. I was just thinking when Eva and Paul and Trish was speaking is that I've often reflected on what is the difference between denial and acceptance, because it can sound the same when patients come and speak to me. They can use the same kind of language as well. And then I've really thought a lot about this, and that with denial, it's still that sense of like pushing it away. It's like, I don't want this, and using words like I'm fighting it and everything will be fine and I'm going to be okay. But it feels like there's a sense still of pushing away. Whereas actually what you are speaking about so beautifully is acceptance, you know, that this is, in Eva's words, effing shit. And it's not very nice, and this is what it is, and this is where I'm at. And then the question isn't about like, how do I push it away, but actually what's going to be skillful and kind to care for the space that I'm in right now. So yeah, thank you to the three of you. And my question actually is towards you, Trish, and I'm really curious, you were talking about the research of the patients who'd gone through your through the courses that you'd run, and I was wondering what the outcomes were, and I was wondering about, you know, what are the kind of benefits that patients are looking for, or what is it, the intention, like why are patients joining you and doing the course at this moment in their lives?
Gosh, that's a big question, Janine. And it's a brilliant one, actually. So in terms of research, I'm not a researcher. I've never really been that involved. So I've always been on the periphery of the research side of things. The good news is that Others do great research, and there's a very good evidence base now for mindfulness and cancer, partly from the Canadians, and partly from the Europeans. And I'm sure there are people in South Africa and China and other places as well. But no, there's a very good evidence base. So what the evidence base comes out with, really, if we're just looking at the kind of research side of things, is interestingly that they're finding that mindfulness very much improves people's cognitive capacity around mindfulness and cancer, because probably everybody is aware that quite a lot of treatment dulls quite a lot of cognitive functioning. There's this sort of chemo brain that's often talked about. So I think the depressive symptoms are reduced. That's no surprise, because MBCT is well known, mindfulness is well known for managing depression. So I think it helps that. But I think the big one that I've always felt was the biggest one really is anxiety and uncertainty. I think that mindfulness really has something quite particular to offer anxiety. Doesn't necessarily remove it, as we've been saying, but it offers an opportunity, a possibility of holding it in a different way, of relating to it differently. I mean, all these are words that we've all heard, those of us who've done some mindfulness training. But I think when we work with people with cancer, we really see that. So I'm going to tell you a story of somebody I worked with, which to me was really quite extraordinary, actually, because she'd only done about Didi, you've heard this tale. She'd only done about 3 or 4 sessions. And she had to have a very nasty, she had a particularly nasty sort of cancer, and she had to have a really very unpleasant test I can't remember how many often, but it was pretty often, every 6 weeks or so. And she used to, before mindfulness, she used to sort of be whimpering as she walked in through the hospital. And then she came back after, I think, could have been the 3rd session, could have been the 4th session. She'd had a checkup, and she looked like she'd seen the light. She said that because she had her feet on the floor, because she could come to her breath, she actually was amazed to find that she didn't cry, that she was able to be really quite steady, quite settled. It was still unpleasant, but she could manage it. And the health people, the nurses, I imagine they probably dreaded it almost as much as she did. Not probably, but, they probably saw her name on the list and thought, oh, I can imagine it must have been horrible to be having to do this test to somebody who was so distressed and anxious and tight, sort of tense. So I think, that's 2 sides of a, research, sort of more formal, and just the many stories like that of people just managing things differently. Not necessarily miraculously, but just differently in some way that really had some concrete result for them in terms of their own experience. Yeah. Is that all right, Janine? Does that sort of, yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Trish.
It never gets old, even if I've heard it, Trish. It's such a powerful story, just of feet on the floor, how, I know I use it in my coaching before any session. I always put my feet on the floor to ground me. And even like as you were teaching us last year in the group work, and just sitting a little bit forward to show the one who's in front of you that you're engaged, you're here, you're listening, you're present with them. Very important. Fatima.
Hi, Didi and Evo.
Hello.
Hi, Trish. I want to thank you for the course that you're actually putting out, and I really look forward to actually joining. And I think I had to share, I'm one of those people. So I'm teaching mindfulness over 12 or 13 years now. And I am one of those people who had to have the mask put on me when I went for radiation for 3 weeks in a row. It was the worst thing ever, as they clip you in, because I'm very claustrophobic, and I still have to do a PET scan once a year. And I'm glad it's also open to therapists out there, because I think on the first time I went, the lady said, just breathe. And it was the worst thing anyone could say, just relax, because just for me, using breath as an anchor in that moment caused me to hyperventilate, you know. So, but it is mindfulness that grounds me. So when I go for my PET scan once a year now, I do the body scan, and I find just grounding or using my body as an anchor very, very soothing, and it just takes me through, or guide myself through the body scan for that period of 30 or just 30 plus minutes. But just, Trish, you're talking about that mask. If I have to, look at it or think about it, it actually brings up that claustrophobia, that anxiety, that actual sheer terror, of just associating it with, being associated with that. But how mindfulness has sort of been my anchor to actually just breathe. And I loved your idea of, you said the mask ball, which I never thought of, but I hope never to have to do that, again. But thank you for sharing. I think it's going to be very, very helpful and useful, not only to people who have to go through a scan or through radiation or just cancer itself, but through the therapists and the medical team associated with that. So I really, really am excited that you have put a course out there. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you so much, Fatima. Thank you for that beautiful sharing and the wise way in which you're dealing with everything. Roland, hello, hello, hello.
Hi, it's nice to see all of you. Yeah, I literally finished sort of a series of sessions with a cancer patient today. So maybe just to share some of the things that she said about how the practice has helped her, and how it just, as Trish was saying, sort of didn't cause miraculous changes, but really just helped her to engage with things differently. So I think the first thing that she said was sort of the moment she realized that where there is still life, there is still hope. That changed everything for her. Sort of, that idea of John Kabat-Zinn also saying, as long as I'm breathing, there's much more right with me than wrong. So she really sort of sank into that, and that was really helpful for her. And I think there was a lot of talk between us about how our thoughts could sort of go into worst case scenario, and how just to be aware of your thoughts can really be helpful, because you can choose where to focus, and without being unrealistic, and without denying that, especially in her case, that her cancer might be life-threatening, but choosing not to dwell there, and focus on something else was really helpful for her. And she really sort of had this idea of just doing one moment, one day at a time, one step at a time. And that was really helpful for her. And one thing that was also really good for her is to cultivate a sense of gratitude. She's made that a practice, like a daily practice, and that was really good for her as well. And it's interesting because she really struggled, especially with fatigue. Um, and we worked a bit around sort of just befriending the fatigue, sort of as a constant companion, not as something to be fought off, because she was really frustrated with being so tired and not being able to do everything that she would normally be able to do, and not fulfill her responsibilities. And there was a bit of guilt around that, and how just sort of befriending the fatigue and bringing in kindness to say, but I am tired now. How can I be kind? And that maybe meant just allowing herself to take a rest in the afternoon every single day, or allowing her family to cook once a week, or even letting go of some of the perfectionism about having the fridge packed just so, and all the color cups exactly together. They could be a bit messy. Letting go of a bit of that was really helpful for her. Yeah, and then Eva, you mentioned about putting the hand of the heart on the heart. That was really also something that she found really helpful, just sort of connecting with a sense of kindness. And she found it really difficult to be kind to herself, because she tended to want to be kind to everybody around her, but exclude herself in that. So she found that really helpful. And things that she would do that was kind was to just go outside and connect a little bit with nature, or to allow herself just to go and sit and do a quilt that would really get her into a different space and into a space of flow, and that would be really nourishing to her. And actually, we ended off today because she went for a scan last week Friday, and she came out clean after her chemo, and she was so surprised. But even, moving like in anticipation of the scan, she said to me, it was really helpful for me to sort of decide beforehand that I'm not going to have an expectation either way, that it would be gone, or that that it would, have gotten worse. I'm just going to be sort of open to whatever, and I would actually be okay if it was just the same. If nothing had changed, that would be okay. And that helped her to just approach the outcome of the scan really calmly and okay. And she was so surprised and happy that it turned out well. And so we ended off today with actually Trish with hats and bags exercise to sort of say, well, there's an opportunity to really align the life that's still there with what is most important and most precious to you, and how can you spend the life that you have honoring that. And it was beautiful for me. What came out were, her family, and she actually drew little hearts on a hat to show her family, and she drew an extra heart, and then she said, you know what, maybe that can just be me, to include herself in the person that needs to be taken care of and loved. And she drew little flowers for her family, and a tree to show her growth. And then also this very real, um, uh, I almost want to call it like an existential sort of anxiety in terms of her spirituality that was immediately present when she realized that her diagnosis was life-threatening, and how just through the mindfulness she's grown sort of closer in her connection with something bigger, and sort of like an existential safety almost that she's grown into. And it was just beautiful to see, because we just did very brief practices, as you said, and they were just so helpful. Yeah, so actually I'm also very excited and thrilled to see resources available to people. So thanks for that, because they really, it changed her whole experience. I think it was wonderful.
So powerful. Almost wanting to just pause a little bit there and just feel into the beautiful sharing that you've just given us. And yeah, almost wanting us to put our hands on our heart and to do a little practice of just feeling into that. And our feet on the floor. And just feeling our breath coming in and out, and how that's landing with us. Thank you. Thank you. There's something in the chat. Oh, it's just a thank you. Trish, do you want to come in with any words?
I wondered about a practice. I mean, perhaps a slightly longer practice, coming to the breath with kindness, which is a particular practice with MBCT for cancer. Would that be helpful?
Yes, that would be lovely. Thank you.
Great. Okay, so let's move into this, and you're allowed to close your eyes with this one. So I know when I train people, they get so fed up that every time we talk about a practice, everybody's keen to kind of, let's get stuck in there. And I say, keep your eyes open. But this time you can really choose. So yes, get yourselves comfortable. And get yourselves comfortable. Be sure to enable your body to be really well supported. with your feet on the floor, or perhaps you might have them tucked, crossed and tucked underneath you, but just however this is, really feeling a sense of contact with whatever you're sitting on, with the floor itself, and perhaps even with a sense of the weight of you going down, a sense of gravity pulling you closer to this earth, to this ground beneath. And before we move into the other part of the practice, perhaps just breathing into that sense of gravity, weight going down, feet on the floor. Taking your seat. And then when you're ready, just connecting also with the rest of the body, to the height going up, the spine lifting up out of the pelvis, and that sense of tallness up through the spine, up through the back. And then just checking into shoulders and neck and head. Perhaps tucking the chin very slightly just to feel that little stretch up the back of the neck if you'd like to. Taking your seat. Sitting here balanced with the earth beneath us and ultimately the sky above, the space of the sky above. And then when you're ready, and if you'd like to, just simply coming to the breath. So perhaps just feeling the breath moving in the whole of the body. And noticing how this is for you, the breath moving. And if at any point you notice that the breath is not so comfortable, perhaps it's a bit tight, or a little bit self-conscious, then always knowing you can stay with the feet on the floor, or with your hands in your lap. You can choose some other place to rest your attention. But if the breath is okay, if you're comfortable with the breath, then perhaps coming to the breath as it moves in the whole of the body. Feeling that sense of breath breathing in and breath breathing out. Or if you're somewhere else, feeling a sense of movement, perhaps movement with the breath. And then playing with possibility, if you'd like to, of kindness coming in on the breath. Almost just like a gentle flow or a gentle possibility of a kind of friendly approach, just coming in on the breath. As if it could move into the body, really moving to any part of the body where there perhaps is some need of kindness or friendliness. Always remembering that we don't have to feel anything in particular when we're practicing in this way. We're just playing with possibility, kindness in on the breath, filling up this body. A little bit like a warm breeze on a cold day, or even a cool breeze on a warm, hot day. And playing with possibility that kindness in on the breath could also Move into the whole of the body-mind system. So that painful memory or that difficult thought, just perhaps breathing with kindness, with a friendly possibility. And I'm going to finish the practice with a poem that I'm very fond of. May what I do flow from me like a river. No forcing, no holding back. The way it is with children. May what I do flow from me like a river. No forcing, no holding back. The way it is with children. And then in these ebbing currents, moving out, returning, I will sing you as no one ever has, streaming through widening channels into the open sea. Okay.
Thank you so much, Trish, for that beautiful practice, that beautiful poem, for your presence, and always sharing from such a beautiful, open heart space. And Ivo, my friend, thank you so much for being part of this and bringing your wealth of experience, your sharing, your kindness. Thank you, Janine, and thank you all of you here, the familiar faces, the unfamiliar. Thank you all for being part of what is very dear to my heart and Trisha's heart of wanting to sharing this work with others. And yeah, just very grateful for everything, for tonight, and for you spending this time with us. So namaste, and thank you so much.